Sometimes, what we mistake for love or loyalty is actually a trap. We spend years twisting ourselves into knots, trying to please someone who can never be pleased, until one day, the truth hits you like a tidal wave. It wasn't just a difficult personality or a bad temper. You were dealing with something much darker, something parasitic. You were dealing with a narcissist. But here's the most important and often scariest realization. You didn't escape them on your own. Your ego wants you to believe you were clever or strong enough to get out, but that's an illusion. If you've been through this, you know there was a moment when you felt a different hand pulling you from that pit. God's hand. The divine separation. Many people think separation is just two people drifting apart or one person finally setting a boundary. But when God intervenes and separates you from a narcissist, it's not a negotiation. It doesn't feel like you just outgrew them. It feels like a violent, painful tearing away. That toxic bond was deep. They had their claws in you, and they don't let go willingly. They hold on with manipulation, guilt, and fear. But when God decides enough is enough, their tricks stop working. It's like scales falling from your eyes. The lies that used to trap you suddenly seem ridiculous. Their charm looks grotesque, their flattery sounds hollow, and their threats lose their sting. It's as if you were under a spell, and the spell is finally broken. That's not just human willpower, that's divine intervention. What's fascinating is that this separation doesn't just free you, it exposes them. When God removes you, the narcissist loses the mirror they've been using to reflect their fake image back to the world. You were their audience, the witness to their false greatness, the one they drained to keep their hollow lives afloat. When you're gone, their spotlight dims, and they're left alone with themselves, which is their greatest nightmare. Some of you might wonder, why doesn't God just change them? The answer is simple and brutal, because you're the one who can still be saved. The narcissist has hardened themselves against change. But you were crying out for relief, whispering prayers in the dark, and God heard you. He answered not by softening their heart, that's their responsibility, but by pulling you from the fire before it consumed you. The process of separation is terrifying because it feels like loss. You lose the relationship, the dream of what it could have been, and maybe even friends and family who were part of that toxic bond. You might think you're losing everything, but you're not. You're losing the counterfeit, the thing designed to keep you enslaved. It's like a surgeon cutting poison from your body. It hurts, you bleed, and you feel weak, but the alternative is death. This is what divine separation is, a painful, life-saving surgery. Afterward, the air feels different. Peace replaces the chaos, and clarity replaces the confusion. You start hearing your own thoughts again and rediscovering who you are, not who they told you were. You realize you were never meant to carry their shame, rage, or emptiness. You were never meant to be a sacrifice on the altar of their ego. The narcissist's downfall. It's crucial to acknowledge this separation as sacred. If you see it as a mere coincidence or a testament to your own courage, you risk going back. People return to narcissists all the time because they forget what it took to get out. They forget it wasn't their own strength, but God's grace. Walking back into that cage after God pulled you out is even more destructive because you now know the truth. Rejecting that truth has consequences. So this separation is more than an escape. It's a wake-up call, a line in the sand. It's God saying, I've shown you who they are, and I've shown you who I am. Now you must choose. If you choose wisely, you'll see that what felt like devastation was actually deliverance, and what felt like punishment was protection. The narcissist feels the separation, too. For them, it's not just losing a person, it's losing their anchor, their energy source, their mirror. Losing you destabilizes them. Your departure becomes the beginning of their unraveling. You might not get to see it because God often shields you from the temptation to gloat or re-engage, but make no mistake, when God separates you, He also sets in motion the collapse of their carefully constructed illusion. The collapse of their false image. One of the most shocking realizations after being separated from a narcissist is how much of their identity was a performance. While you were with them, You couldn't always see it. They were good at hiding it, projecting competence and even greatness. They wore that mask so convincingly that even you questioned your own instincts. Once the fog lifts, you look back and see how every smile, compliment, and act of generosity was staged bait. You weren't dealing with an authentic human being, you were dealing with an actor. And you were their prop. You were the mirror they used to reflect their manufactured identity back to the world. You validated them, covered for them, and polished their mask when it cracked. When you're no longer there, their mask doesn't shine the way it used to. Imagine a stage actor with no audience. The performance loses meaning, it collapses under its own emptiness. That's what happens to the narcissist when God pulls you away. The show doesn't play the same without you in the seats, without you applauding on cue. They know their image depended on you, and when you're gone, it's not just a loss of supply, it's an exposure. It's the first crack in the mask. They will scramble to find new players for their stage, but the performance is stale and desperate. Maintaining a fake identity is exhausting, and when their primary witness is gone, the hollowness becomes unbearable. You might hope the collapse will humble them, but in most cases, they double down on the act, patching the mask with more lies and theatrics. The more they try to maintain it, the more absurd it becomes. Truth has a relentless way of breaking through. It has no mercy for illusions. It tears them down, reveals the scaffolding, and leaves the actor stripped and exposed. For the narcissist, this exposure is torment because they've spent their entire life avoiding that moment. They've built layer upon layer to protect themselves from facing their own emptiness. The collapse is not quiet, it's messy and angry. They lose control, the one thing they crave above all else. They thrash, blame, and rewrite history, but once the mask is cracked, it can never be restored. You, standing on the outside, now get to see the truth. You get to see how fragile their empire really was, and you realize you were never the weak one. You were the strong one, because it took all of your strength to keep their illusion alive. Once you were gone, it couldn't stand on its own. The collapse of their image is not just their downfall, it is your liberation. For as long as you believed the act, you were bound by confusion, self-doubt, and constantly questioning your own worth. Once the mask falls, you see them for what they are, and you see yourself differently too. You see that you are not who they said you were. That clarity empowers you and restores the dignity that was stolen. The isolation they cannot escape. After the mask collapses, something else happens that is even more terrifying for the narcissist. Isolation. It's not just being alone in the ordinary sense, it's a spiritual exile. The narcissist needs an audience the way a human needs oxygen. They cannot survive without someone to feed off of, someone to validate their lies. At first, after you're gone, they rush to replace you. They charm new victims and appear as though nothing has changed. But it's never the same. The new supply doesn't patch the same hole. The cycle becomes frantic and desperate. And tragically, they can't rebuild what they lost because the whispers start. People notice the cracks. Old lies come to light. Slowly, even new admirers begin to distance themselves, sensing the darkness. This is the beginning of their isolation. For a narcissist who thrives on being the center of attention, that silence is deafening. To be irrelevant is like death to them. And this is a spiritual dimension of judgment. It is the natural consequence of building a life on deception. The scaffolding collapses, and there's nothing left but them, standing alone, surrounded by the echoes of their own lies. Narcissists don't do well with solitude. They are confronted with themselves, and that is their worst nightmare. They've spent their entire lives hiding from their broken, empty, and ashamed self. They will numb themselves with distractions and addictions, anything to avoid that confrontation, but nothing satisfies. Their isolation is also your protection. Because if they still had the power of community, they would come for you again. But once their audience is gone, their reach shrinks, and their empire crumbles. They may post pictures with new friends, but it's all smoke. Deep down, They know those relationships are shallow and built on the same lies that already failed once. So, even when surrounded by a crowd, they are alone, perhaps more alone than they've ever been. Their whole identity is built on control, and in that moment, they realize they control nothing, not the people, not the narrative, not even themselves. The isolation grows like a shadow, following them into every room and every empty night. That's the punishment. It's not just that they lost you, it's that in losing you, they lost the illusion that they could ever escape themselves. And this is why, in the end, their isolation is the beginning of your freedom. The very thing they cannot escape, the loneliness, the silence, the irrelevance, is the very thing that protects you. It creates a distance that cannot be bridged. And while they rage and flail, you are finally free to build something real. Don't waste your pity on their loneliness. That loneliness is the harvest of seeds they planted long ago. And don't envy their crowd, their apparent success, or their glittering facade. Underneath it all, they are already in exile, already isolated, already tasting the judgment of the life they chose. And that's a weight you no longer have to carry. While they are trapped in their own isolation, you are free. The spiritual reckoning. After the mask collapses and isolation sets in, something much deeper begins to stir. This is where it gets truly frightening because it's no longer just about appearances or relationships. It's about the soul. It's about a reckoning. You can't live a life built on deception, manipulation, and pride and outrun the spiritual consequences. The narcissist spends their entire existence avoiding responsibility, but eventually, reality catches up. It always does. This isn't just a psychological phenomenon, it's spiritual. It's the universal law that says you reap what you sow. You cannot sow betrayal and cruelty and expect to harvest peace. The bill always comes due. They've been playing a dangerous game, not just with people, but with God. Every lie was a rebellion against truth itself. Every manipulation was an assault on another soul. Every act of pride was arrogance toward their Creator. When you live in constant rebellion against God's truth, a reckoning is inevitable. This reckoning doesn't happen all at once. It's a gradual process, beginning with a quiet, knowing awareness that something is wrong. They try to silence it with endless distractions, but the awareness grows. It whispers to them at night, stares at them in the mirror, and creeps into their thoughts in quiet moments. And what it says is this: you are guilty. You are empty. You are exposed. That voice, that whisper, is the truth they cannot outrun. It's the weight of a conscience that has been suppressed for so long, finally breaking through. For some, this reckoning could be redemptive, but for most narcissists, pride won't allow it. They'd rather cling to the illusion, even as it crumbles, than bow to the truth. And so the reckoning becomes torment. The conscience doesn't stop speaking just because you refuse to listen. It gets louder. Their temper becomes more volatile, their paranoia grows, and they start to see enemies everywhere. The very weapons they used on others, gaslighting, projection, and blame, now turn inward. They gaslight themselves, project their guilt onto others, and blame everyone until there is no one left to blame but themselves. When that realization finally breaks through, it's unbearable. It's not just the shame, it's the truth they've been running from all along. Without the mask, without the audience, they are nothing. And they are accountable to the people they harmed, to the truth they denied, and to the God they defied. The true spiritual reckoning is not just a loss of status. It's a glimpse of eternity that terrifies them, because eternity is built on truth, not lies. This is why you often see narcissists consumed by bitterness toward the end. They know their house of cards has collapsed and there's no rebuilding it. They know they're standing in judgment already, here and now, and it eats at them. Some might feel they deserve it, and in a sense, they do. But there's something tragic here, too. The reckoning was meant to be a chance to wake up and repent, but pride won't allow it. So what could have been salvation becomes judgment. What could have been redemption becomes condemnation. The emotional and mental breakdown. By the time the reckoning takes root, When the mask has collapsed and isolation has set in, something else follows, a breakdown. Not a bad day, but the slow, inevitable disintegration of their mind and emotions. For years, the narcissist has lived by projection. Everything too ugly or painful inside of them, they threw onto someone else. They accused you of being selfish, unstable, or the problem. They kept themselves intact by convincing you that everything was your fault. But once you're gone, all that darkness has nowhere to go. It turns inward. The rage, the paranoia, the shame, it all comes burning back to them. And they don't have the tools to handle it. They've spent a lifetime avoiding emotional responsibility, so when denial and deflection stop working, they panic. This panic shows up in many ways. Some become consumed by uncontrollable anger, lashing out at anyone. Others sink into a hopeless despair that corrodes everything. Some spiral into addictions, desperately seeking an escape. But no matter what they choose, the relief is temporary because the enemy is now inside. They've built their lives on control, but during the breakdown, they lose it. Their own thoughts become the tyrant, their own emotions the enemy. You can't bully your way out of shame or manipulate your way out of emptiness. So they spiral, and the cracks keep showing. People notice the volatility and sadness seeping through the performance, and even those who tolerated them before begin to drift away. Their breakdown is not your responsibility. You might feel a strange guilt, thinking you could have held them together, but that's a lie. They were already falling apart long before you left. You were just the one holding the pieces together. When God pulled you away, He didn't create their collapse. He revealed it. The breakdown is not always visible from the outside. They may still post smiling pictures, but the real collapse is internal, in the sleepless nights, the compulsive behaviors, and the knowing dread they can't admit to anyone. The fortress they thought would protect them becomes their prison. The very ego they worshipped becomes their executioner. This is a sobering lesson about what happens when you refuse to accept the truth. Truth doesn't go away just because you deny it. It waits, and the longer you resist it, the heavier it grows until it crushes you under its weight. Your freedom and their warning. While their life spirals downward, your life begins to rise. The separation that once felt like devastation becomes the soil of your freedom. At first, you may feel shaken, disoriented, and scarred, but slowly, you begin to feel the air lighten. The silence, once terrifying, becomes comforting. You start to hear your own voice again. What grows out of this is something extraordinary. Freedom. It's not just the absence of control. It's the ability to live without fear, to speak without apology, and to rest without guilt. It's the rediscovery of joy in small things, the peace of knowing you don't have to explain yourself to someone who never listened anyway. Your freedom is not just a gift for you, it's also a warning to them. Every time they look at you, thriving and healing, they're confronted with the truth that all their power and manipulation failed. You got out. You survived. You are living proof that their dominion was never absolute, and that terrifies them. They might try to reinsert themselves into your life, not because they've changed, but because your freedom exposes their failure. But you don't belong there anymore. Every time you say no, your freedom becomes louder, speaking not just to them, but to everyone around you. It says, this is what happens when truth wins. Your life becomes a living testimony of redemption. Their downfall becomes a cautionary tale of what happens when pride goes unchecked. The world watches both of you, them, consumed by lies, and you, carried by truth and grace. They see the contrast. And it gnaws at them because they know it could have been different. But don't let their warning consume you. Don't waste your life staring back into the ruins of theirs. Your story is no longer about them. It's about what comes after. It's about rebuilding, pursuing new dreams, and fulfilling your purpose. The narcissists spent their life trying to destroy you, but in the end, they only revealed your strength and pushed you toward the God who saves. Their end is tragic, but your future is hopeful. Their downfall is a warning, but your life is your victory. You were not just delivered from them, You were delivered for something. For joy, for peace, for love that isn't poisoned by pride, for a future that isn't shackled by lies. When God pulls you from the grip of a narcissist, it's not by chance. It's divine strategy. Their end may be terrifying, but it's not your destiny. Their collapse is the echo of pride, but your freedom is the sound of redemption. You were chosen, rescued, and set apart. Let their downfall be a warning, but let your restoration be a testimony. When God separates you, He doesn't just deliver you from destruction, He delivers you into purpose. And that is the ultimate victory over the scary end they could never escape.